Next, we'll move on to Representative Michael Connolly. Representative.
Thank you, Chair Keenan and Chair Arciero. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you, Chair Keenan and Chair Arciero, and thank you for taking us out of turn. I'm here today to speak in support of House Bill 1378 and Senate Bill 886, an act enabling local options for tenant protections, co-lead filed by myself, Rep. Nika Elugardo, and Senator Gomez, who will be joining me on this panel. In addition to supporting our bill, I want to express strong support for the similar bill filed by Rep. Rogers and Senator Jalen, as well as several other bills on today's agenda that would advance the cause of housing justice, including House Bill 4208 to enable a tenant's opportunity to purchase in the city of Somerville. Now, we've already heard across the Commonwealth, the ongoing affordable housing emergency continues to result in widespread displacement, cost burden, and homelessness. But Chapter 40P often makes it impossible for our municipal officials to take meaningful action to stabilize housing for our most vulnerable residents. The Tenant Protection Act offers one piece of a comprehensive approach to the affordable housing emergency. It would enable local rent stabilization and tenant protections. And to echo what Rep. Rogers emphasized earlier, our bills do not seek to require these protections, and we don't attempt to prescribe the details of these protections for any given community. Instead, what our bill would do is repeal the preemptive provisions of Chapter 40P, thereby enabling our municipal officials to bring everyone to the table. And I want to be clear, that means renters, homeowners, and landlords alike, to craft tenant protections that work on the local level. The Tenant Protection Act allows a municipality, by vote of its local elected body, to adopt rent stabilization, just cause eviction protections, notification of rights and resources for tenants facing eviction, regulation of upfront fees, such as broker fees or payment plans for first and last month's rent and security deposit, as well as anti-price gouging protections. Our bill explicitly exempts small owner-occupant landlords from any rent regulation. In addition, it empowers municipalities to craft broader exemptions as they deem fit, or to specify that certain protections will only apply in specific anti-displacement zones. And this anti-displacement zone idea came directly from our leading housing justice organizers. I want to note that one exemption that could be considered by a city is one that I think the real estate industry often overlooks, and that is the potential to exempt new construction of multifamily housing. States that have recently passed rent stabilization laws typically exempt new construction for a period of years, and in this way, we can make it possible to stop displacement without impacting the incentive to build new housing. Representative Elugardo and I first introduced this bill last session, and we've been so grateful to see the initial response. It's been very encouraging. In 2019, legislators in New York State, Oregon, and California all passed rent stabilization laws. More recently, voters in Minneapolis and St. Paul passed a pair of rent stabilization initiatives. We know Boston Mayor Michelle Wu won election on a platform that included strong support for rent control, and today she is submitting a letter to this committee in support of our efforts. Meanwhile, I'm also proud to say we're expecting to hear testimony today from the mayors of Cambridge and Somerville, from city officials in our community, and from across the Commonwealth. There are scores of municipal officials who are now calling on us to allow for a local option for rent stabilization. In conclusion, I want to circle back to something I said at the top. Lifting the ban on rent stabilization is just one piece of a comprehensive approach to addressing the housing emergency. To truly make housing a human right, we need smart housing production, strong tenant protections, and big investment in a program of guaranteed housing for all. We should acknowledge last session we made progress on this comprehensive approach by passing two major housing production bills, the governor's bill as well as legislation to require zoning for multifamily housing near transit. We also took action to protect tenants by passing tenant opportunity to purchase and eviction ceiling. Unfortunately, Governor Baker vetoed those tenant protections. So in conclusion, I'm here to respectfully ask the committee to work with us to once again advance this bill favorably. And with that, I'll pass it to our colleague, Senator Gomez of Springfield, followed by Representative Elugardo of Boston. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Representative. Any questions of the representative? Seeing none, we'll hear from Senator Gomez and Representative Elugardo.
Thank you, Chair Keenan and Chair Asiero, and members of this committee for hearing me support of S 886 and its House counterpart H 1378, an act enabling the local options for protections. I filed this bill alongside my colleagues in the House, Representative Elugardo and Representative Connolly, to address the ongoing statewide housing crisis that this community faces. This legislation enables local rent stabilization and establishes necessary tools for municipalities to protect vulnerable tenants from displacement, price gouging, and homelessness. For nearly 2 years, COVID-19 has caused irreparable harm and trauma of needless evictions. For the Commonwealth to recover, we must protect renters throughout this public health crisis. This pandemic has accelerated the negative impacts of price gouging in our communities and allowed for landlords and real estate speculators to drive out families from their homes. In the Hampden District, which I represent, Greater Springfield, it's facing a housing and rental crisis unlike any we have seen in the past. A study conducted last year by the UMass Donahue Institute found that more than half of all BIPOC renters in Springfield are cost burdened, meaning more than 30% of their income goes towards their rent. These issues extend beyond Springfield's, affecting surrounding areas into the Pioneer Valley as well. It's for these reasons that I speak in support of this critical legislation. Thank you to the chairs and the members of this joint committee for taking this time to consider the importance of this legislation. Please do not hesitate to contact my office should you have any additional questions. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak in front of this committee.
Thank you, Senator. Great to see you. Just if I could just make a quick point. At the outset of the hearing, I asked that the chat be used only for purposes of determining who is next to speak. There's a lot of back and forth in the chat right now, and what we're hearing is that people are curious about when they're going to speak, and their assignation and when they're being told they're going to speak is being lost because of all the other comments that are on the chat. So going back, the chat, we request only be used for members of the committee to ask a question and also to notify those on the call who are on deck to speak. Please do not use the chat for any other function. It's inhibiting our ability to notify people that they are up next. So thank you for your cooperation on that. Next, Representative Elugardo.
Thank you, Chair Keenan, and thank you, Chair Asiero, for taking us out of turn. I also want to give a special thanks to the residents and advocates who wait for hours and hours and cannot be taken out of turn. We deeply appreciate your advocacy and, of course, that of my colleague, Senator Gomez and Representative Connolly. I have more thanks because we have many Boston City councilors here today in support. And also I spoke with our mayor in Boston, Mayor Michelle Wu, yesterday, who asked me to relay that her apologies for not being able to make it. Mass and Cass is presenting a full schedule for her today and tomorrow. And also, as Rep. Connolly said, so grateful to her for submitting written testimony because as she has shared with me, lifting the ban would greatly enable Boston to have a targeted approach to dealing with our rapidly rising rents and property values and property taxes as a result. So Chair Asiero knows that my husband and I just bought our first home. And he knows that because he took a tour of our district. It turned out to be a 5-hour tour with food and staff, and it was great fun. And many of the advocates here on the call today showed up to showcase the wonderful things you can do when you allow government to invest effectively in what tenants are doing and what homeowners are doing right there on the ground. And this is an extension of that, really. You know, it took my husband and myself 25 years to save. I know I look like I'm 7. No, just kidding. I'm almost 50. It took us 25 years to save because our rents kept increasing by a lot. And so we had to move a lot. And we raised our daughter. People ask her, what neighborhood you grew up in? So it's JP, but a lot of different houses in JP, right? And Mission Hill, because we had to move a lot. And on top of that, the down payments to get into the market kept going up. So we kept thinking we had enough. And then if you take a hit because you got to help a family member out, you know, that few thousand that you lose, it kicks you out of the market. We're lucky, you know, for us, our income increased with time. That's not been the case for the vast majority of Massachusetts residents. We know about wage stagnation. And so the rapidly rising rent means financial crisis or worse for many people. And worse means homelessness in some cases, including for families. So the Commonwealth needs a modernized approach to a contemporary challenge. We're not in the situation we were in when my daughter, who's now married and living in Quincy because she can't afford to live in Boston, you know, we love Quincy, but she'd rather live where she grew up, and she can't with her husband. She can't move back here because it's too expensive. And when she was born, we were in a totally different situation. And that's when this ban passed. So Rep. Connolly and I filed, and so grateful when, as soon as Senator Gomez was elected, he jumped right in there with us, the Tenant Protections Act. And a lot of people will either cheer or heavily moan when they hear about that, right? Because they're like, oh, rent control of the past. Well, one of the things that Rep. Connolly and I have been really trying to help folks understand, and our colleagues have been working with us to help folks understand, we're not really talking about whether we should go back to rent control of the past or not. And particularly my fellow members of the committee, because I have the distinguished honor of being on the Housing Committee this session with you, we really need to understand we're not proposing to go back. We're proposing to go forward. And so it's the wrong debate about whether we should have rent control from the 90s or not. Lifting the ban is critical because not because they're going back, but because we can't really we can't stick with the way things are, right? The way things are do not work. So this 27-year-old language when the ban is really antiquated. And I just want to read. I don't think people know that it says this. So if you just Google Chapter 40P, Massachusetts General Law, you will see the purpose, right? You click on the purpose and it says, this policy is based on the belief that the public is best served by free market rental rates. Does anybody believe that anymore? Like just completely uncontrolled free market rental rates? I mean, if we ever believed that, if that was a statement we were debating back then, we're not even debating that anymore, right? So we already need to strike that out from the code. It shouldn't even be there. And so it's not bringing back the rent control from the 80s. It's whether radically and unconditionally unfettered rental markets are really in the best interest of the public. So according to National Low Income Housing Coalition, we had our Senate colleague talk about the situation in Springfield. Well, Commonwealth-wide, more than 30%, more than 3/4 of Commonwealth residents who are low-income renters are paying more than 30% of their income on housing, right? So this is especially in urban areas where the numbers are staggering, and many renters are paying over half of their income on housing, as Senator Gomez said. So this isn't just localized, it's across the board. And I've even had one of my Republican colleagues talk to us about some of the challenges in his relatively wealthy district. So we can't overlook the pockets of poverty, and we know that it's also creeping up into the middle class and has well crept into the middle class by now. So people are choosing between their housing and often sacrificing food, education, utilities to stave off homelessness. And we've had testimonies on this today, and we'll have many more, I'm sure. And like we've pointed out, homelessness is on the rise. So this is unacceptable by itself. The Massachusetts housing crisis, where nearly 1 in 5 middle-income renters, so that's 20% of the people just in the middle, are paying over 1/3 of their income. That means probably most of the people on this call, right? You're paying more than 1/3, and it's tough for most people. and they're unable to stay. So unregulated markets, completely unregulated markets, they actually foster the crisis that we're in. And that's where we're trying to get out of. So the TPA strikes this antiquated plan. I read that language about market rates are the best interest of the public. And the new purpose, I'm going to read it. The purpose of this chapter is to provide municipalities with a variety of flexible options to help address the housing emergency in a locally appropriate manner. Everything under that, we can fix it up to whatever we need it to be, but we need to strike that language that's in there and replace it with language like this. And that's what the municipal leaders who are here from all over the state, not just from my great city of Boston, are telling us today. And I really do pray that we listen. So the TPA, Tenant Protections Act, that's this bill, it invites municipalities to learn from the past, not to ignore it, but to learn from it and to craft something better and something that allows for tenants and all property owners who want to do the right thing to flourish and to thrive in place where they grew up, where they live. So learning from the past means some things that Rep. Connolly listed: never freezing rents. We're not talking about that. So that came up in the mayoral debate. That's never, ever what we're talking about. We're talking about capping annual increases. So I know the committee members know this. I'm saying this for the public. Capping annual increases at reasonable levels. I'm getting some Zoom thing here. I'm just going to click that off. Okay. It means allowing for reasonable profit, generous profits, so that you can maintain the properties. This was a problem in the past. That's something that localities can address. It means all owner occupants of 3 families or less remain exempt. We got to repeat that over and over because sometimes folks forget that's most of who we're talking about when we're concerned about the impacts, right? And so we're excluding those people no matter what you do from every local option. That will be excluded if you are an owner occupant. And you can expand that. Any municipality can expand that to more units or income levels or target elders or whatever you want to do. And then municipalities can also slow down rental increases temporarily, or they can limit the scope, as Rep. Connolly said, and I'm sure City Life will talk about, anti-displacement zones that our own Vito Urbana, I was the first one that heard, they were the first ones I heard talk about that in a meeting with Rep. Connolly way back at the beginning of my very first term. So we can regulate, work with fees, you can choose to do nothing, okay? But there's a lot that you can do to ensure a generous profit while avoiding rewarding speculation or even exploitation that wants to double or triple, as we've heard here, some numbers in a matter of years, how much rent a person is paying. That's not good for the Commonwealth, not only in terms of ethics and morality, but we lose revenue when we send people into poverty like that, because there's a whole cascade of structural poverty events that go down when you can't afford your housing, from healthcare to jobs to transportation, you name it. So my husband and I, we were lucky, but Massachusetts deserved better than the luck of the draw. The TPA doesn't solve affordable housing. We got a lot of other bills and more bills that need to be drafted, but it does give cities and towns the choice to prevent rents from skyrocketing during a crisis. So please help us in lifting this ban and ensuring that we slow down these rapidly rising rents and property taxes that are greatly impacting our elders and others to ensure a healthy future where we can all live here. Now, I know that was a long testimony. I did sign up to testify on 2 bills, Chair. My second testimony is shorter on H4229, a home rule petition. Should I give that now, or should I wait to be called at a later time?
And now would be fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I hate saying I will be brief, because then what happens if you're not, but I will actually be brief on this one. So H4229 is a unanimously passed home rule petition from Boston that only applies to a couple parts of the city, one in my district, and it's to restore Boston's governmentally involved housing protection. So you're familiar with expiring use, where for some reason, 20, 30, 40 years ago, depending on the property, we said it'll be affordable and then it won't after a certain amount of time. And now you've got folks that are living in the place, mostly elderly and people with disabilities, who now are suddenly told, oh, we can't do it. We can't do it anymore for you. And then they have to move, or what are we going to do, right? So what we can do is pass this bill, which allows for owners to guarantee a fair net operating income in exchange for affirmatively seeking out and accepting government housing resources that will enable affordability. I can speak to my district, the Forbes building. I'm in talks not only with the tenants and advocates, and we heard from MAHT earlier and will in the future, I think, but also with the owner, Mr. Paul Clayton, who is a man who has assured me he wants to maintain affordable housing, but he needs resources from the city in order to do that. And there's a real trust problem. I have a lot of trust for our administration. I have a lot of trust for the D&D, the Department of Neighborhood Development, but it's difficult for owners to go in and feel like they can go into an honest deal with the city. This bill really helps everybody know we're all on the same page here. We want to extend affordability, and we want to make sure that the owners have the profitability to maintain the property and to keep it green and all that type of stuff. And so that's what this bill is about. And I really hope that you will pass that quickly as well, at least out of committee. We can keep talking about the language. Happy to bring in that owner. I will talk with the reps from Brighton. I know that Babcock Towers is another place that might be impacted by this bill, but please do pass it out of committee so that we can continue this conversation and make sure that our elders and people with disabilities are able to maintain their housing indefinitely. We owe them that. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Any questions of the representative? Seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony. We will now move on to Representative